Hello, I just wanted to go ahead and produce a quick correction video for the REST API client side for goal number 9. As per the instructions that were in the video, it's going to produce a error, and I'll explain why that error occurs and how we can go ahead and fix that. And in fact, the newest lab document has now a corrected version, which is the one that we're going to cover in this video really quickly. So let me launch my server and I'll show you the current wrong version that we have. And so here, this is the issue is in our implementation for reset game. So this was one of the last steps that we did. And if you might recall from the last video, what reset game does is right now it's just grabbing the URL and it's going to fetch it's going to send that request to our backend server. And recall the point of reset game is to go ahead and after a game has already lost, it allows you to replay that game or to effectively tell the server to regenerate a new random number and say that the game isn't over anymore so that people can play it again. So we're going to hit that endpoint that causes that reset to happen in the back server, and we're going to wait for that response. And we get the response. Our original implementation was once we got that response, we were immediately going to go ahead and then get the JSON from that and then use the then function to say in response to this JSON being delivered, we're going to just go ahead and then re-render the view page, the game view. However, what's going to happen is let's launch the service and see what happens. Let's see what the issue ends up being here. So if I go and hit npm start, I launch my backend server, right? Okay, we're going to watch that spin up. Okay. So now let me go and open up our web page here. Okay, we have our number guessing game, and actually let me open that up twice over so we can pretend to have two users. Okay, so let's say we have a user who creates a new game. Let's start a game. We have this game, right? So let me get the game ID. And let's say that we have this user that guesses the number. The number is 204. I'm going to cheat and look from the server console log. So let me put 204 and so hit submit. Now, right now, if we hit replay, that works from this user's perspective. Like, let's do that. Yeah, that's what, and then we can start replaying. That works. But what doesn't work is if we go to new game, yeah, let's do new game. Let's start a new game. Okay, we have another ID here. We find out what 94 is our number. So let me type in 94 and we win the game. Okay, so I win the game. So let me go back over here and pretend like I'm a second user, right? And so here I'm going to join the game and I want to join the game. And let's pull this out here so we can see. See, I'm joining the same game. I'm going to use the game ID. I'm going to join. It already says, oh, look, I lose. Perfect. But then I want to select to replay. And look, replay doesn't do anything. Now, clearly, when I look at the proposed use case of the logic, and let's take a look at our implementation here. So clearly what the intent is, we get the response for the reset. So the reset should provide back data, which was going to be the min, the max, the ID, and game over, right? We don't send the passcode, and all that data, except for game over, should be the same, right? Because we're replaying the same game, so the ID should be the same, the min and max, but the game over state shouldn't. So when we invoke view game, notice one thing we're not doing though is we're not updating our local client side variables. And that's going to be the big issue. That's what's causing the bug. So recall that we're trying to synchronize the state of our game data on the client alongside the game data that we have on our server. So every time we send a request and response, and every time we request and get our game state back, one thing we should consider doing is updating the state of our client-side data, so it's in line with our server-side data. So in this reset method, we did not do that, right? We just carried straight on to view game. So what causes the issue there is that if I go into the view game method, I'm going to grab the view element. I'm going to get the HTML that's going to render the game view. I'm going to update the view element with this new HTML. I'm going to add the controller for the submit, but then I'm going to check if the local variable for game over is true or false. Well, after we reset the game, we never mutated the state of that. So from the client perspective, it still thinks that the game is over. So before it renders this, it immediately redirects and invokes the game over menu to then say you lose. And that's exactly why whenever I keep clicking replay, it is actually invoking, the game over. I'm not sorry, is that actually invoking the reset? Like it's doing that. It's actually invoking view game, but it's also then doing game over again. And again, this is the culprit, this game over variable. So to correct this, what we need to do is we need to go back to our game script. And we have to do this the same way that we had implemented our get game method. So we're going to use the get game or the find game as a base. So the same way that in this earlier function, when we requested for the response, and then from the response, we grab the JSON data and store that inside of data variable. And then we could check the properties, like if the data, if it was successful that we got the data, then there's a start, there's an end, there's a game over, right? And then we can request to view a game. So the exact same implementation we used here, we're going to refactor reset game to be instead. So here, if we look at reset game, we're going to use the URL that hits that endpoint that causes the reset on our backend service. Then we're going to do the fetch and wait for the response. And then from that response, we're going to invoke JSON and wait for that data. And now we have all the data properties post reset from the backend server. And so since we have that, we should take this opportunity to update our game data that's on the client side, so it's in line with what's on the server side. Now I know for a fact that min and max didn't change, right? When we invoke reset, we implemented this ourselves. So we know based on the specifications, when we invoke the reset function on the server side, it re-randomizes a passcode and it changes the game over state from true to false. So we'll check the success property. So if it's a success that we got the data, then we're going to access the property game over, and we're going to overwrite our local variable inside of our data script here. We're going to overwrite that to now be false. Then we're going to invoke the view game, so that if we invoke the view game, which is inside of our views, if I do that, then when we grab the view element and when we create the HTML for our game view, and then when we add the controller, when we go to check this local variable, this client-side variable game over, we've mutated it since we've reset it. So the game over should now be false, which means that we won't execute this game over function call. And so it will allow us to be able to actually click replay. So let's save that. Let's refresh here. Let me refresh here and let's test this out, and let's see if this new implementation, this correction on for goal number 9. So for goal number 9 for reset game, let's see if this doesn't solve our problem. So I'm going to actually start everything up fresh. I don't have to restart my server, but we're going to do it. So I'm going to restart my server here. Perfect. I now have my service running. So now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create a new game, right? let's do that. Okay, so now I'm going to grab that game ID here. And then let me see what this is. So that is number 271. So let me get the game over there. 271. We're going to submit. Okay, so game over, you win. So now as a second user, right? Let's pull this out here so we can compare. We're going to join the game that's currently already over. So this is going to be, so here we're going to use that game ID. We're going to join. Now before, because we weren't properly updating our client side data to be in line with our server side data, when we're hitting replay, it wouldn't let us, right? Because it still thought the game was over. But now when I click that, it updated the client side variable. So now it allowed us to view the game without instantly also triggering the end game view afterwards. So now we can actually start playing our game here and actually do submits. 500 is too low. So let's do 750. Okay, and yeah, here you could see we can just keep playing the game. And so that's what the issue is with the old video instructions, and that's this is how you fix it. And this is a good explanation of why it's important oftentimes to synchronize your local variables with what the server state is, that the state on the client and the state of the server is constantly refreshed and in parity with one another, because what might happen is exactly what was happening. We were transitioning to a wrong state because our client thought that the game was over when the game wasn't over. Actually, if I refresh the page, the server was hadn't done the mutation. The reset was appropriate. We just didn't recognize it because we didn't update the data on our client end. So these are just considerations to have when you're implementing a distributed software system where you have shared data that gets transferred from one end to the other. So I hope this helped, and thank you for watching.